Number 10. Maxwell Lord Infinite Crisis. In the pages of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the Blue Beetle is left near bankruptcy after funds from his company were mysteriously stolen. His investigation into his missing fortune yields something much darker though, a conspiracy to wipe out the superhuman community orchestrated by the Justice League International's former manager, Maxwell Lord. Now, he had enjoyed his influence over the Justice League and the formation of the Justice League International in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was a wealthy and powerful businessman and claimed to have learned nobility and compassion from his late father, Maxwell Lord III. All of this pointed to him as a very genuine figure out to help keep Earth safe, but I guess we were wrong. During the Invasion saga, Lord acquires the superpower of mind control and things only get worse from there. The build up to Infinite Crisis saw many shocking events occur in the DC universe, including Lord's brutal murder of Ted Kord, aka Blue Beetle II. Lord's betrayal continues to damage the League throughout Infinite Crisis, with Lord stealing Batman's metahuman satellite to hunt down every superhuman on Earth with an army of cyborgs at his disposal. Wonder Woman straight up just murders him though after he mind controls Superman into assaulting his fellow Leaguers. As a last laugh after death, footage of Wonder Woman snapping his neck leaks worldwide, causing her to be alienated from the rest of the League. Number 9. Flash Out of Time and End of the Road. In a possible future, this iteration of the Flash is a much darker Barry Allen with 20 years in the future. This future Flash first appears in the Flash Annual Volume 4 Number 3 as a broken man. Reeling from the death of a close friend and fellow speedster Wally West, future Flash travels backwards through time on a crusade to murder all of the former enemies he deems responsible for West's death, hoping to somehow change the future. His actions only widen a tear in the Speed Force, however, and the once hero ultimately decides to use a present-day Barry Allen's energy to seal the rift. Proving his superiority in a one-on-one battle against the present-day Barry, the pair are soon interrupted by the arrival of Wally West himself. Able to take on both speedsters at once, Future Flash's actions caused the one thing he began his quest to stop: the death of Wally West. Barry killed numerous rogues along the way before learning the error of his ways with help from his past girlfriend Patty Spivot, and eventually gave his life to save the present-day Barry Allens. Number 8. Gambit Mutant Massacre. Deciding if Gambit deserves a spot on this list today was a bit tough because although he is a member of the X-Men, he's a notorious thief with a reputation for stealing the most impossible of objects, not to mention all of, the other terrible stuff that he's done. Amanda, however, was able to convince me that he is still technically a hero, and that's why he's showing up here today. Although he wasn't technically a member of the team quite yet, I'm still counting his actions that led to the Mutant Massacre event as a betrayal towards the X-Men. Gambit aided the evil Mr. Sinister in his plans in exchange for having a piece of his brain removed to allow him to have better control over his powers. Gambit formed the Marauders, a group of superpowered mercenaries, and led them to the Morlock tunnels, resulting in the event Mutant Massacre. Gambit's sins were finally aired out though in the early 2000s, and all of it seems to be somewhat forgiven, but that being said, I still feel it's worth remembering that Gambit's first canonical act was betraying the X-Men. Number 7. Cyclops Avengers vs. X-Men. First of all, I have to get this out of the way. Man, do I love talking about the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. The Phoenix Force is heading towards Earth, and the Avengers, obviously fearing the almighty entity, made Iron Man and Giant Man prepare a disruptor weapon to kill the Phoenix Force. Instead of killing it though, the blast alters the entity and divides it into 5 fragments that forcefully bond with 5 X-Men: Namor, Magic, Colossus, Emma Frost, and of course, their leader Cyclops. While the heroes tried to use this awesome power gallantly and responsibly, they ended up leaving quite a bit of damage behind them. Possessed by the Phoenix, Cyclops killed Professor Xavier and led many attacks against humans and mutants alike. Afterwards, he did adopt a more of a revolutionary attitude, leading a rebellious team of X-Men and coming into conflict with other superheroes and his former friend Wolverine on more than one occasion. Because of all this, Cyclops was briefly viewed as a martyr, believed to have been killed by Black Bolt in Death of X before it was revealed he had just succumbed to Mpox just days before. Number 6. Aquaman Throne of Atlantis. Aquaman has always been a bit torn, being a hero from 2 worlds and all. While he was Atlantean royalty, his primary concern is always the fate of his world's oceans. However, he still has this sense of responsibility towards the surface world of his father, and this really came to play in the Throne of Atlantis storyline. Aquaman finds himself at a crossroads with his brother's determination to start a war between Atlantis and the surface after malfunctioning Navy missiles hit Atlantis. He realizes, much to the surprise of his teammates, that the Atlanteans were utilizing a strategy he had devised in case the 2 powers ever went to war. Despite his close relationship with his fellow heroes, he refused to stand with the Justice League against the Atlanteans and ultimately staged a brutal offense against the Justice League in the battles that followed, forsaking his old team for his homeland. To add even more insult to injury, the League eventually discovered that Aquaman's longtime pal Nuidas Vulko was behind the whole thing. He orchestrated for Atlantis to be bombed specifically to incite a war. Now, what was the end goal, you might ask? It was for the League to defeat Ocean Master, which would then lead to the reinstatement of Arthur as their king. Number 5. Wolverine Old Man Logan. Now if there's one member of the X-Men that you can truly trust, it's definitely Wolverine. He is surprisingly loyal and dictated by a code of honor. Still though, that doesn't stop a betrayal or two from happening every now and then, though it wasn't necessarily his own fault. In the Wolverine Old Man Logan storyline, we get to see the vicious side of Wolverine that we've all come to know and love. However, like I said, it wasn't really his fault. So basically it's the future and Logan is an old man, and he hasn't used the Wolverine persona or his claws since this mysterious night in the past when the villains supposedly attacked. We learned through some flashbacks that a massive group of 40 supervillains attacked the X-Men mansion, and during this attack, Wolverine gets in touch with his primal side and grows crazy and just kills every single one of them. After the fight and the intense slaughter, things change and Wolverine realizes that this was all just an illusion. The entire time Wolverine had his vision and mind altered by Mysterio, and all the villains that he killed in combat were actually his fellow X-Men. This destroyed Logan and he decided to retire his Wolverine mantle for good after that, essentially killing that part of him so he would never do something like that again. It's definitely a sad way to end a run as a hero, but I can see why he felt that was necessary, and as much as I hate to say it, this was a huge betrayal and definitely a shocking one at that. Number 4. Green Lantern Emerald Twilight. In 1994, DC decided that it was finally time for Hal Jordan to step down from the Green Lantern mantle so that it could be passed on to someone else. So how did DC decide to end the career of one of their most beloved heroes? Well, they couldn't just do it quietly. Of course they had to turn him into a villain of some sorts, undoing pretty much all of the good he's ever done. In the Reign of Superman storyline, which took place after the Death of Superman storyline, Hal's home of Coast City was completely destroyed by the villains Mongol and Cyborg Superman. As a result, the city was demolished and its 7 million citizens were killed. This turn of events made Hal completely lose it, and he believed that if he could steal all of the main power battery's energy, the source of the Green Lantern ring's power, he could permanently rebuild Coast City. To do so, he killed all of the remaining Green Lantern Corps and the villain Sinestro, which unfortunately led him to becoming the villain Parallax, who even to this day looms over Hal. Hal did eventually redeem himself by sacrificing his life to restart the sun during the Final Night storyline, and also by revealing that his madness had just been caused by him being possessed by that fear entity. Hal would later go on to reform the Green Lantern Corps thanks to the expert guidance of Jeff Johns. Now all things considered, this is a huge betrayal and a bit of a tough one to overlook, making it remain a black spot on DC's legacy. Check out this insane storyline for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48 to number 50. Number 3. Tara the Judas Contract. Now if I'm being honest, there is probably no betrayal more famous than that of Tara Markov's. Debuting in New Teen Titans number 26, Tara Markov was a young, precocious girl who joined the team. It was learned later that Tara infiltrated the team at the behest of Deathstroke, dismantling the team from the inside. Throughout the 4-part storyline, Tara gives Terminator all of the information he needs in order to take down the Titans one by one, and he does so starting with Corey and Donna Troy, slowly making his way through all of them until he got to Dick Grayson, who was able to elude him. Realizing that he can never truly retire from superheroing, Dick adopts a new costume and identity and calls himself Nightwing, while Joey is also ready to follow him into battle as Jericho. Adolin then gives the heroes the location of the Hive Command Center, and Nightwing and Jericho go to the Hive base nestled in the Rocky Mountains, sneaking into the facility and discovering that the Teen Titans have been strapped to a giant machine which is slowly siphoning away all of their life energy. Nightwing and Jericho fight through a horde of Hive shock troops, but are eventually captured. Using the Terminator's body and weaponry, Jericho frees the other Titans and begins fighting the Hive, and Tara is enraged at Terminator and feels that his affection of Joey makes him look weak. She completely loses control of her sanity and yearns for nothing more than the death of everyone in the room. Changeling refuses to believe that Tara has gone bad and is certain that the Terminator has just brainwashed her. Tara's powers rage out of control until she finally causes a mountain of earth and debris to collapse down from the ceiling, unfortunately killing her in the process. Number 2. Batman Tower of Babel. Easily one of the most trusted but not the most trusting heroes around, it should really come as no surprise that Batman had secret files outlining the ways to take down his teammates just in case, right? Well, apparently it was pretty shocking for the other members of the Justice League during the Tower of Babel storyline. It's an insane level of preparation, like Batman prepared for some truly brutal plans, including blinding Green Lantern and turning Superman's skin invisible so that he'd go insane from yellow sun overexposure. It was revealed in JLA Tower of Babel that these files were stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used to orchestrate a debilitatingly effective attack on the individual members of the JLA. When Batman comes clean with how the villain was able to pinpoint their various weaknesses, half of his teammates vote for him to be booted out of the group. However, he ends up leaving on his own accord, but his friendship with the other members was deeply damaged, and even to this day it remains a bit of a problem. Even in the New 52 universe, such plans still existed and Batman came clean about it, but thankfully this time Superman was able to convince the League not to hold it against him. Number 1. Captain America Secret Empire. I feel like we all knew this one was coming. Like, come on, this was definitely the most shocking betrayal in recent comic history. After the Red Skull messed with and manipulated Kobik, a sentient cosmic cube, Steve Rogers revealed himself to be a Hydra defector, but more specifically, he was a Hydra sleeper agent who happened to be a twisted version of Cap that secretly took his place. Allying himself with a new Madam Hydra, Rogers took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control of the world's government. Once in power, Hydra just made its move. S.H.I.E.L.D., infiltrated by Hydra thoroughly, began assuming control of key locations and executing any who stand in its way. I'll let you all check out this storyline for yourself because it is a great one, but I will tell you that our good Cap comes out on top in the end, defeating his evil doppelganger in a head-to-head battle. A few weeks later, and after a ton of hard work, the United States was thankfully turned back to normal.
At number 10, we have BAPHOMET. Although he was actually just onomatopoeia in disguise, it was still a moment of betrayal that took Batman by surprise. BAPHOMET appeared to be a young, up-and-coming vigilante superhero who appeared numerous times to help Batman, one time helping him defeat the Black Spider. He showed face so many times, in fact, that Batman started to trust him and eventually gave him his blessing to start fighting crime in Gotham. Batman even had Baphomet fill in for him while he was on vacation in Aspen with his fiancée. And Onomatopoeia as Baphomet was really playing the long game. He even caught Mr. Freeze and single-handedly stopped the Joker. So Batman really started to confide in him, even bringing him to the Batcave one day after a real heart-to-heart moment. In this instance, Batman even goes as far as taking off his own mask in front of Baphomet, who promptly reveals his true identity as Onomatopoeia and slits Silver St. Cloud's throat, who is Batman's fiancée. Of course, at this point, Batman knows that he messed up big time, but how could he have known? This dude played the long game, with a sad outcome for Batman, of course. At number 9, we have ZATANNA. This is another pretty sad one, but then again, that's sort of the theme of this whole list, right? ZATANNA, a powerful superhero who has control over magic, is a longtime love interest for Batman. And in one storyline known as the Mind Wipe storyline, ZATANNA is caught wiping Dr. Light's memory, and also trying to change his personality to be less evil. But when Batman walks in on this happening, she also wipes part of his mind as well. Of course, Batman doesn't realize this since his memory had just been wiped, but the Justice League has to come together and confess to Batman what had happened. This crushes Bruce, causing him to naturally develop some pretty serious trust issues and create Brother Eye, an intelligent system that orbits Earth to keep an eye on superheroes that may betray him in the future, which leads to more sad discoveries down the road for the Dark Knight. Okay, at number 8, we have Catwoman. I know, she definitely isn't considered a villain to Batman either. In most cases, as we all know, Batman is usually romantically associated with Catwoman. And going into the Nolan-verse, there's an instance in The Dark Knight Rises when Batman's trust for Catwoman is strong enough that she actually leads him into a trap set by Bane, in one of the closest calls we see Batman ever face, comics or movies, to facing death. This just proves that Catwoman really can't be trusted no matter how influential or appealing she is to Batman. She will always put herself first, and that's something we can basically confirm after seeing this. Luckily, at the end of this event, when Catwoman sees how hard Bane beats up Batman, she gains sympathy, leading to a change of heart. But it was sort of too late at that point. At number 7, we've got Alfred. Not a superhero in the state we all know him as, but why he belongs on this list is that in one storyline, he's actually given superpowers. And if his intentions had remained heroic, Alfred would have been a superhero by nature. But on Earth 1, while Batman is away, Alfred decides to track down a criminal organization that Batman had been monitoring. But he's captured, and when Batman and Robin come to save him, he sacrifices himself by walking into a trap set by the bad guys before they could. On the brink of death, Alfred is revived by a physicist named Brandon Crawford, who uses a radiation treatment to revive him. Unfortunately, this instead turns him into the Outsider, giving him superpowers and leading him into an angry rage towards Batman. Thanks a lot, Brandon. You had one job. Anyway, when the Outsider targets Batman's allies, Man-Bat, Batgirl, and Robin, they get the best of him, tearing the evil Outsider out of Alfred's body and leaving him vulnerable. And Alfred, in all his heroic glory, lays the last blow, taking out the Outsider for good. It's nice to have you back, Alfred, but maybe just stay put in the Batcave from now on. Number 6, we have Stephanie Brown. When Stephanie is Batman's Robin, she betrays him as well. Sort of. It was an accident, but a betrayal nonetheless. When Batman seemingly dismisses her abilities to be an adequate Robin, she sort of pushes him to train her, which he finally does. But When she disobeys him twice in combat, Batman is forced to retire her because he feels he just can't trust her. Feeling isolated, she goes off on her own to try and prove her worth. She gets a hold of one of his long-term plans to deal with the criminal underworld of Gotham, but due to her missing one key detail which the plan was predicated on, it all spins out of control and causes a citywide gang war, resulting in the Batman War Games storyline. She is then captured by Black Mask and tortured for information about Batman. She escapes, but later succumbs to her injuries in the hospital with Batman by her bedside. A very sad end to a potential superhero who just wanted to be accepted, but instead betrayed the very man she was trying to impress. At number 5, there's Jason Todd. Jason, who used to work alongside Batman as Robin, turns on him and teams up with the Riddler and Hush, another character who betrays Batman. We'll talk about that later. What happens is that Batman thinks Jason was killed by the Joker, and after a while of accepting this as fact, Batman is completely caught off guard by the return of his old partner, but this time with ill intentions for Bruce Wayne. So it turns out he actually is killed by the Joker, but after Superman Prime alters reality, Jason is revived. Sort of. He falls into a coma for a year and is taken by Talia al Ghul to a Lazarus pit to restore his powers, but when he reemerges, he isn't himself and is influenced by Talia to confront Batman, wondering how the Joker hadn't been killed to avenge his death. When Batman doesn't show remorse that he spared the Joker's life, Jason is enraged and takes on the mantle of Red Hood. He then does some nasty stuff like leading multiple criminal gangs in Gotham, sharing Batman's identity with Hush and the Riddler, and other villainous things which would be detrimental to Batman's ability to keep the streets of Gotham adequately protected. At number 4, we have AZRAEL, or John Paul Valley, in the Batman Nightfall story arc. A staunch supporter of Bruce Wayne, John Paul Valley is placed in charge of the Batman alias as Bruce Wayne is facing burnout due to run-ins with Bane. But while AZRAEL is wearing the mask and cape, he actually starts to inflict too much violence on the criminals of Gotham, going against the reputation that Bruce had taken so long to develop. AZRAEL even goes as far as distancing himself from Robin, believing that Robin isn't enforcing enough violence on the criminals of Gotham, seeing this as the only way to restore peace. Commissioner Gordon's trust towards Batman also takes a hit from John Paul's instability, because of course, no one is informed that this new Batman isn't in fact Bruce Wayne. It's another devastating betrayal of Bruce Wayne's trust, because when Bruce needed him most, a close confidant not only betrays his wishes and his reputation, but also gets carried away with his influence over Gotham, at one point leaving a captured civilian to die, along with serial killer Abattoir, who had been the captor. Just a flat out betrayal all across the board. Okay, at number 3 we have Thomas Elliot, otherwise known as Hush. Thomas was a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne who had the ability to become a superhero, but instead went supervillain, taking a stance against Batman in everything he does. What happens is that Thomas Elliot turns bad and decides to try and kill his parents for their fortunes. But Thomas Wayne, Bruce's father, actually keeps his mother alive due to his advanced surgical skills, which angers Thomas, who turns on Bruce in a bitter turn to resentment. He starts referring to himself as Hush, a masked villain covered in bandages, set out to defeat Batman. And he gets pretty close too, teaming up with the Riddler, the Joker, Poison Ivy, and Killer Croc in an elaborate plan to take down Bruce Wayne altogether. So yes, I know what you're thinking. He's not really a superhero, but deserves a spot high on this list because he could have been. This guy had dealt with a tougher upbringing than Bruce, his dad being an abusive alcoholic and his mother never protecting him adequately, so he had a harder time following the path of good that Bruce had led. But when they would play together as kids, Thomas would often outmaneuver Bruce, proving that had he pushed through his trauma and gone down a path of good like Bruce, he could have been a superhero that might have even contended with Batman's abilities. And I just had to put him on the list of times Batman was betrayed, because what hurts more than a longtime friend betraying you, you know what I mean? Actually, I hope you don't know what I mean. Let's keep it at that. At number 2, we take a look at the Injustice storyline when Superman betrays his otherwise longtime friend Bruce Wayne, along with some other superheroes as well. In a storyline explored both in the comics and in the video games, Superman is tricked into killing a pregnant Lois Lane under the influence of drugs that the Joker gives him. As a result, Superman goes against his core values and kills the Joker. This throws him into a spiral, as he also turns on other members of the Justice League who he once called teammates, including Batman. When Batman notices that Superman's reign of terror has turned into an authoritarian regime, he sets out to stop him. So what does the once heroic Superman do? He reveals Batman's true identity to the world and recruits Bruce's own son Damian to fight against him and the Justice League alongside him. Ouch. This brings us to number 1, Damian Wayne, Bruce Wayne's own son. This is a sad and a brutal betrayal, which is why it belongs at number 1 for me. Having been brought up by his mother Talia al Ghul and trained as an assassin from a young age, Damian is an aggressive and unagreeable young man who doesn't like to follow rules, especially those set by his father, who he feels is too easy on the criminals and isn't allowing him to thrive as the trained assassin that he is. Sound familiar? So when the opportunity arises, Damian Wayne joins up with Superman, who, as we've just previously explored, had just adopted all those values that Damian desired. So in a selfish and naive move to serve his own needs to kill, Damian Wayne, the former Robin, betrays his own father and helps to take on the entire Justice League as a force of evil. Just like many supervillains, his motivations are pretty deep-seated, and it's pretty obvious that he'd always wanted to serve alongside his father, but this just proves that just like Hush, a powerful being's upbringing can make a huge impact on the brutal path they choose. I'm sure if Bruce Wayne had known that he had a son in the first place, and it hadn't been sprung on him by Talia so late into Damian's adolescence, the boy could have been saved from these dark ways, which led to his betrayal. Brutal.
Number 10, Captain America. Or a version of Captain America, at least. This version of Captain America betrayed a whole bunch of superheroes and pretty much all of the civilians of the United States of America. That's right, we're talking about Hydra Cap, who technically now is an alternate, but at the time of reveal was sold as being a longtime sleeper agent of Hydra in the main continuity, changing pretty much everything we thought we knew about that character's origin. In reality, Captain America was simply altered by the Cosmic Cube, and the real version of him from the main continuity still existed within the cube, or shards of the cube itself. He was technically changed by a version of the Cosmic Cube that was a person who was named Kobik, but anyways. Peter himself actually also lost his company, Parker Industries, as a result of Hydra Cap's takeover. To keep his various offices around the globe from falling into Hydra's hands, Peter had to basically run them all into the ground, essentially destroying everything he had built. If that isn't a betrayal, I don't know what is. And it's Captain America! Shocking. But not really, because it's Hydra Cap. Like I said, alternate reality. Whatever. Number 9, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is another hero who kinda accidentally, I suppose, betrayed Spider-Man. While in the comics, Strange recently saw Peter as his champion in a fight between Strange and Mephisto, in the MCU, Strange tried to help Peter out with the fact that he and his friends all seemingly got rejected from the colleges they'd applied to because of his identity being revealed to the world. Doctor Strange decided to use a spell that would make the world forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, even though it was also against the new Sorcerer Supreme, Wong's, wishes and his recommendations. Now, granted, Steven did mean to help Peter here, he wasn't like intentionally betraying him, but in the end everything went kinda haywire, mainly due to Peter, who kept trying to change the parameters of the spell as Strange was mid-casting it. But this isn't really how Strange betrayed Peter anyways. It was more afterward, when other villains from across the multiverse ended up appearing in the current reality, and Spider-Man wanted to try to help them as opposed to just banishing them after finding out they were all pretty much fated to die, which Strange had kind of seemingly known about but just didn't really care about. Strange had told Peter to round them up, but withheld that important information about their fate, which to me was a pretty major betrayal. Like, these are people from the Spider-Verse, I feel like you should at least tell Peter what he's doing and what kind of fate he's condemning these people to if he sends them back. And of course this revelation only led to another betrayal in kind when Peter decided to release these villains, helping them escape Strange in an effort to actually fix them. What can I say, you betray someone and then they're probably gonna betray you back, that's how it goes. Number 8, Boomerang. Okay, so Boomerang isn't really a hero. He's more of a villain than anything, but for a moment there he was leaning in the direction of being a hero at least, and I think because of that we can give him a spot on this list. Boomerang is known for being a member of the Sinister Syndicate and ended up getting roped into Sinister War. Before he was battling it out with all the other Sinister teams though, he was actually almost Peter and Spider-Man's ally and friend at one point. In fact, I would say he was Peter and Spider-Man's ally and friend, and roommate. Okay, so in reality Boomerang was just using him to get help collecting pieces of a tablet that he wanted, but that's where the betrayal part comes in. When Fred Myers applied to be Peter Parker's roommate due to Myers' reputation, Parker really wasn't feeling it. He wasn't so sure, but he did decide ultimately to give Myers a chance after he kinda helped him out and kinda saved his life. And when he did, he was happily surprised. The two became friends, and Boomerang even showed promise as Spider-Man's ally and a potential hero in his own right. In the end, however, once the tablet was acquired, Boomerang revealed his true colors, and admitted that this was kind of his plan the whole time. But he also admitted he did feel bad for betraying Spider-Man in a letter that he left him. Myers actually felt so bad he ended up helping Spider-Man out at one point during Sinister War, helping him to hide from the others for a time. Aw, so cute. Also, I just really like this story, so I was like, I could talk about this on this list. And I got excited, and here we are. Number 7. Fantastic Four. When Spider-Man was just starting out, the Fantastic Four were among those to betray him. I know, shocking. Spider-Man went to them looking for help supporting his Aunt May and himself. You see, back in those days, and kind of in general with Spider-Man and his comics, money was tight, and Spider-Man was trying to find a way that he could use his talents and his abilities to help pay the bills. He was hoping to join the FF, who he assumed must have a salary wage as superheroes that would be reasonable in amount due to them, you know, saving the world all the time. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He broke into the Baxter building in an attempt to impress the family of amazing superheroes, only to find out that they were a non-profit organization and they didn't really get paid to do what they did. And even if they had space on the team and could afford to pay Spidey, they claimed initially they wouldn't really want him. Ouch. Spider-Man at the time was considered an outlaw by the press and police, and they didn't want to be affiliated with him even. Harsh. Of course, that's all water under the bridge now, and Spider-Man has actually been a member of the FF's Future Foundation and is actually on the extended or backup roster for the Fantastic Four team. So it all worked out in the end, but in the early days, it was a pretty harsh betrayal. Number 6. Morbius. Morbius and Spider-Man have had a complicated history. Sometimes they're allies, sometimes they're foes. Morbius himself also has had a complex history. Sometimes he's a hero, sometimes a villain, sometimes he's a little more somewhere in between those two. Case in point, when he resurfaced after seemingly being cured of his vampirism by a bolt of lightning. I kid you not, that is what happened in the comics. This stuck for quite a while, but eventually Morbius's hunger and his thirst for human blood returned. He attempted to reach out to a doctor at Empire State University for help, but instead ran into Spider-Man, who didn't trust him. It turned out that he was in earnest trying to figure out what was going on and fix it, but the doctor he wanted help from turned out to be an ally of Hydra. She kidnapped Morbius, and when Spider-Man came to free him, things quickly went kind of crazy. Instead of teaming up with Spider-Man and showing gratitude for this rescue, Morbius attacked his captors, and then when Spider-Man intervened in that attack, attacked him instead, draining him of blood and inadvertently turning Spider-Man into a vampire-like creature himself for a while, who was known as Hunger. Also, I know there's gonna be people that are gonna be like, Amanda, Morbius does not want blood. He just wants plasma, Amanda. It's just all about the plasma. Look, the plasma's from the cartoon, okay guys? And they had to say plasma because they couldn't say blood because it's a kid's show. So fun fact. Although plasma is important as well. You can donate plasma and you can donate blood. There's lots of cool things you can donate. You should check that out and go save someone's life today. This just became a PSA from Amanda McKnight. Can you tell that I donate blood? I feel like you can. Number 5. Spider-Man. Although typically this hero is often known by the name Scarlet Spider. That is right, we are talking about the hero and Spider-Man clone, Ben Reilly. Currently in the comics, Ben is the Spider-Man, or a Spider-Man, currently roaming New York City. He is the Spider-Man of choice by Corporation Beyond, who is looking to get into the business of superheroes, apparently. They acquired the right to the Spider-Man name, and as such, Ben actually asks, or kind of more tells Peter, that he can't be Spider-Man anymore, or at least he can't use that name. He does ask for his blessing as well out of respect. He's not trying to be a jerk here, but it's obvious that Peter is hurt by this revelation, as he already seems to be suffering from a bit of like an identity crisis perhaps, which is also pretty interesting because I feel like so is Ben at this point. Number 4. Wolverine. Oh boy, Wolverine and Spider-Man aren't always two heroes who see eye to eye, and we've seen them butt heads a few times, despite both being heroes and even at times teammates. I would say one of the things that has come up the most when it comes to Wolverine potentially betraying Peter has to do with one of his biggest love interests in the comics. Yep, we are talking about Mary Jane Watson. In the Ultimate Comics, the two heroes body swapped, and Wolverine in Peter's body attempted to put some major moves on Mary Jane, and in the main continuity, Wolverine once insulted their relationship, causing Peter to throw him through the window of a building. A seemingly impenetrable, bulletproof window too. Just FYI. That is how upset Peter was about the remark. Number 3. Black Cat. Black Cat is another hero who has betrayed Peter in the past. And to those of you focusing on her more criminal and villainous past, yes, Felicia Hardy is not a saint, but I would argue that now, currently in the comics, she is more a hero than a villain. Also, she recently just worked with Captain America, and I feel like if you're doing that, you gotta be pretty good, right? Captain America doesn't really work with villains usually. I think at least we can give her an anti-hero status. She betrayed Spider years ago, but has also betrayed him more than once when she ended up going behind his back to get herself some superpowers. She did this because she knew Spider-Man was worried for her safety, and she wanted to be able to keep up with him and help him, to not worry about her. Unfortunately, she turned to Kingpin to get said powers, and they ended up being bad luck probability-based powers, so she really only ended up hurting Spider-Man a lot in the end, especially when he kind of realized that something was up with her and that she was keeping secrets. Not a good look. Not a good look, Felicia. Number 2, Spider-Man. What is worse than having your lover betray you? How about you betraying yourself? Yes, I know we've already talked about Spider-Man on this list, but now we are here to talk about the other Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, in comparison to his clones at least, Peter Parker. Peter might do everything he can to save the world and make New York a safer place, but at the end of the day, there is one enemy he really can't defeat: himself. After all, Spider-Man is probably one of the most guilt-ridden superheroes of all time, always feeling like he is responsible for the death of those that he loves. He doesn't just feel as though he's betrayed himself and those he cares about as a hero, but he also therefore betrays and often sabotages his own happiness because of this, believing sometimes that he doesn't actually even deserve to be happy. It's pretty tragic stuff. Also, it's not always your fault, Peter. Sometimes bad things just happen, You can't control everything in life, you just gotta accept it. Peter needs more therapy, that's what I think. Number 1, Iron Man. Iron Man is probably one of the characters most well known for betraying Spider-Man on this list, even though what he did to actually betray him is somewhat debatable in terms of it being considered, like a one-for-one betrayal. Iron Man encouraged Peter to join him and support the Superhero Registration Act. Spider-Man happened to be such a big fan and friend of Tony's that he agreed to do so and even unmasked for Tony Stark during a televised public statement. However, later on, this would come back to bite Peter in the butt when he and his family ended up being targeted by criminals who wanted Spider-Man dead. Surprise, surprise. Aunt May ended up in the hospital as a result of a targeted attack, and eventually this whole debacle would also lead to Spider-Man losing his marriage to Mary Jane when the pair made a deal with Mephisto in order to save Aunt May's life. There is even a what if focused around what would happen if Mary Jane was the one to be killed, where Peter specifically blames Iron Man for basically everything bad that has happened to him up till this point. Well, not everything, but everything surrounding this. Also, he realized what was going to go on with Iron Man wanting to use the negative zone kind of as a prison, found out that, and then he was like, I'm really not about this. And then even then, they chased Spider-Man down. Although I believe Iron Man was kind of like, guys, let's just talk to Spider-Man, let's not be weird about this. But at that point it was too late. Iron Man really had no control and it had gotten out of hand. That's what had happened. Civil War I, baby.